The story takes place in spring with soft pink cherry blossoms scattered across the park. Amidst the beautiful scene, a young couple sits close together. They seem to be lovers, but there is a strange tension in the air. The boy Kominato Namito looks clearly confused, his eyes wandering to the girl beside him. She is truly captivating with her stunning beauty, but there is something unusual about her. She is wearing a paper bag covering her face, and even stranger, her clothes seem to be soaked, as if they were covered in some mysterious liquid. At that moment, the girl suddenly turns to him. Her hand reaches out to touch his leg. Her fingers point towards his bare foot. Startled, he screams in alarm. But he quickly realized that she was just wondering why he wasn't wearing shoes. He let out a sigh of relief, his initial panic turning into mild curiosity. Before he could reply, he suddenly remembered seeing her a few hours ago, as he was walking into school. He thought about a song in which the singer wished for 100 friends. He walked into the classroom on the first day, feeling a little lonely, wondering if he could make a friend or two in this place. His name was Kominato Namito, a freshman in high school with bright eyes. He smiled as he thought about the task of making new friends. Feeling utterly helpless in making friends, Kominato looked at his classmates and noticed two students chatting intimately because of the assigned seats. Inspired, he decided that asking about seats might be a way to start an acquaintance, but as he prepared to make that move, a strange thought suddenly popped into his head. The person he was approaching might become his girlfriend, or worse, she might claim to be a demon queen with great power. He imagined himself stuck as her loyal servant for the rest of high school. Exhausted by his own paranoid thoughts, he buried his face in his hands, dreading spending his school days as someone's servant. He quickly stopped thinking too much when a teacher entered the classroom, signaling the start of homeroom. Feeling somewhat relieved, he turned his attention to the introductions. Looking forward to the chance to find a friend with similar interests, he decided to observe his classmates, looking for someone easy to get along with. Carefully and with a touch of drama, he opened his eyes, half expecting to find some hidden demon queen in the class. Paying close attention, he was immediately impressed by the fluent, confident self-introduction of a student named Aikawa. He was a well-mannered, well-built boy with a warm smile. Aikawa shared that he had played baseball in middle school and invited anyone interested to be his friend. Kominato listened attentively, feeling hopeful as the others introduced themselves one by one. However, when the teacher called the next student's name, Kominato suddenly froze, realizing that his turn would come next. He knew that a good introduction would make him more approachable, but he felt uneasy because there was nothing outstanding. Panic rose as his moment drew nearer. He decided to imitate the introduction of the student in front of him, nervously closing one eye and clasping his hands, silently hoping that the student before him would have a simple introduction that he could easily repeat. His attention sharpened when a beautiful but seemingly nervous girl stood up to introduce herself. She faltered, struggling to form full words, her anxiety so intense that even her name came out in fragments. The teacher called her Kamiyama Samidare and encouraged her to relax, introducing herself slowly. Kominato found her nervousness strange, especially when he noticed that water was dripping from her uniform, which only added to the mystery. After a while of struggling, she finally managed to say her name, clutching her soaked uniform. He became increasingly suspicious not only of her extreme shyness but also of the strange liquid coming from her uniform. The teacher smiled gently, asking her to remove the paper bag covering her face. But when all eyes turned to her, she clutched the bag tightly, begging to keep it on to avoid embarrassment. This made Kominato even more confused. He had never seen anyone hide their face behind a paper bag instead of the usual options like sunglasses or a hat. Her actions, if anything, only drew more attention, leaving him completely confused. Suddenly, he stood up, startled by the water dripping from her outfit as she struggled to finish her introduction. Feeling nervous about the awkward situation and half afraid that he might get covered in her mysterious liquid, he hastily introduced himself, sharing his hobbies and favorite subjects without much thought, bowing respectfully. He finished his introduction just as she turned to look at him. But the teacher told him to sit down and moved on to the next student. As the others continued to introduce themselves, he noticed that she was still standing, whispering to her to sit down. When she finally sat down, water splashed from the chair, wetting his face since he was sitting right behind her. The teacher left and asked the students to prepare their writing materials for the next class. Kominato breathed a sigh of relief, feeling mentally exhausted from all that had just happened. He saw Aikawa-kun surrounded by his classmates, forming a circle of friends playing baseball, and felt disappointed that his simple introduction didn't seem to attract anyone. Suddenly, he was startled when Kamiyama-san turned to him, mumbling something in broken words. Confused, he tilted his head to let the water drain from his ears and politely asked her to repeat. Gradually, he felt himself relax as she clenched her fists, tears welling up in her eyes to thank him for helping. She sat down without waiting for his response. Looking at her from behind, he began to think about the possibility of making friends with her. She wasn't as scary as he had initially thought. Maybe she was gentle. So he looked down at his hands, red from her fists, and still wet from the liquid she seemed to carry. He paused, realizing her strength matched her strong presence. He thought of Kamiyama-san, imagining her as a mountain girl, strong and majestic. This made him a little hesitant to approach her. However, his attention was diverted when a charming classmate cheerfully asked Kamiyama if she could use her first name. Although still confused by Kamiyama's unusual aura, he couldn't help but admire the brave girl who was challenging the mountain girl. With confidence, the girl introduced herself as Hinata Arai, extending a friendly invitation to Kamiyama to join her group. Kamiyama, seemingly embarrassed, hesitated a bit, saying that she wasn't good at casual conversations. Arai quickly dispelled her worries, saying that she would fit in easily if she tried. Listening, Kominato noticed that Kamiyama's reasoning was starting to weaken, especially when Arai pointed at the other girls waiting to greet Kamiyama. Looking at all that was happening, he fell silent, placing his hands on his head, certain that he would never fit in with this group. Although Arai was kind and encouraging, he felt uncomfortable with the wary gazes of the other girls. He was also worried about Arai's ease in approaching Kamiyama, as if she was leading Kamiyama into the light without fully understanding her. To Kominato, it was like inviting a vampire into the light of day, just because it seemed like a good thing. Kamiyama's expression changed, surprised when Arai suddenly reached out to fix her crooked bow, joking about Kamiyama's shaking hands. She reminded Kamiyama that as high school students they would wear this uniform for 3 years, so they should wear it with respect. Listening closely, Kominato became even more confused when Arai joked about whether Kamiyama was feeding his uniform or taking it for walks twice a day. One day, he was so confused that he wondered if he had been transported to a world where clothes were alive. His confusion deepened when Arai turned to him, smiling brightly and asking about his uniform care. At first, he thought he had misheard. But seeing Arai's confident expression, he began to worry that he had neglected his uniform. Hesitantly, he confessed that his uniform didn't like to eat, only to have Arai laugh and explain that she was asking about how to care for the frayed edges. Embarrassed, he scratched his head, realizing how strange the comment about feeding the uniform sounded. Arai then invited both Kamiyama and Kominato to share their uniform walking routes. But before he could reply, he noticed the other girls exchanging worried glances, implicitly warning them not to continue digging into Arai's weirdness. Realizing that he had gotten too deep into this strange conversation, he quickly grabbed his bag, determined to get out of it. When Arai suggested that they continue talking elsewhere, she grabbed Kamiyama's hand, and as she stood up, her chair suddenly tipped back, causing Kominato to fall painfully onto the floor. Kamiyama immediately stood up, wrung the water from her clothes, and apologized. Meanwhile, Kominato waved her hand nervously to dispel her worries. But when she saw his hand, she suddenly grabbed his collar and called for the nurse, surprising everyone. She easily lifted him onto her shoulder and ran outside. Feeling embarrassed at being carried by a girl, he fell silent, though the curious looks from the other students made him feel more embarrassed than the pain in his arm. After a few minutes of running, she finally stopped, and he gently pointed out that they had gone to the back of the stadium instead of to the infirmary. She apologized and admitted that she had gotten lost. He gently asked her to put him down, pointing to her wound and insisting that she was fine, suggesting that they return to class. However, his concern increased when he noticed that she was having difficulty breathing, as her paper bag mask was too wet and no longer effective. In a panic, he reached out to remove it, worrying for her safety, but she held his hand tightly, insisting that she would take care of it herself. Kominato stared at her back, confused by her determination to keep the paper bag, wondering if it was just pure embarrassment or something deeper. He was then stunned to see her calmly tear open her wet paper bag, clumsily but decisively, and pull out a new one from a spare sheet of paper she had brought with her. Turning back to look at him, she breathed a sigh of relief. Having avoided a more serious incident, still unable to believe what had just happened, he hesitantly asked her if she always carried a spare paper bag. She smiled and explained that when she felt nervous, her bag often got wet, making it more difficult to breathe. Amused by her serious answer, he laughed, which made her feel embarrassed. However, he quickly apologized, appreciating her strange determination, and secretly impressed by her thorough preparation as she quickly put on her new bag. Just then, the bell rang, signaling the end of class, and they exchanged confused glances before she ran off in the wrong direction again. This time, he gently guided her back and they hurried towards the classroom as he peeked inside. Kaminato quickly withdrew his hand when he realized, with a start, that class had already started. They sat outside the classroom door in the hallway, both too nervous to enter during class. Knowing that Kamiyama was probably feeling anxious as well, he realized that the longer they waited, the harder it would be for them to enter. He suggested they go in, reassuring her to stay calm and close to him. She nervously agreed with a natural plan of action and a simple excuse to the teacher. They entered, but when they saw their classmates and the teacher, his nervousness led him to come up with a strange excuse about a desk that had stuck their hands, requiring them to go to the infirmary to get sprayed with paint. While she stammered beside her, the teacher laughed and told him to relax, joking that he looked like a middle-aged woman struggling with her smartphone. She then said that she had heard about it from Arai-san and asked them to take their seats. As he sat down, he muttered a thank you to Arai, who just nodded happily in response, paying attention to his hands. Feeling better now that he was seated, Kaminato let out a sigh of relief. Kaminato felt tired even though it had only been a few hours, but it felt like 2 months had passed with all that had happened. His worry rose again when he saw that Kamiyama's uniform was still soaked, and heard the strange sounds coming from her as she gasped. Her paper bag was wet, and her skin looked pale. The urgent feeling of worry made him think of asking the teacher for help, but he stopped, afraid of exposing her more to everyone. Then he remembered the large paper bag in his backpack and felt a glimmer of hope, hoping that it could help without thinking further. He hurriedly took the large paper bag and placed it on her, only to be surprised to see that it was much larger than the previous bag. But his surprise quickly turned to admiration when she skillfully adjusted the bag, making it fit perfectly. She thanked him, but he reminded her to face forward. Where the classmates were buzzing about the paper bag she had just created so quickly, when the teacher announced the end of class and reminded everyone to prepare their materials for tomorrow, he felt exhausted and was about to leave immediately. However, as he stepped outside, he saw Aikawa walking with a girl. Kaminato smiled wistfully, wishing that he could also experience the joyful companionship of a girl. On the way home, lost in his thoughts, his hand pressed tightly to his chest, he was startled when someone suddenly grabbed his leg. At first, he mistook the attacker for a Mishuda's kappa, but then he realized it was Kamiyama-san, who was thanking him profusely for helping him. Embarrassed, he quickly told her to stand up, insisting that there was no need for thanks. However, he couldn't help but notice her surprising strength. She firmly expressed her gratitude and, with stuttering words, vowed to do anything to repay him. Shocked, he realized this was the dream he had had, a girl who sincerely promised to do anything for him. In a panic, he tried to sneak away, noticing the curious eyes of his classmates and the whispers about her soaked appearance and his obvious role in it. To ease the awkwardness, he quickly suggested that she thank him by treating him to a glass of juice next time. But to his surprise, she immediately threw him over her shoulder and repeated the word juice before rushing straight to the cafeteria. Despite his pleas for her to stop so he could get his shoes and bag, she was completely focused on her task, bringing him juice in a rather strange way. It felt like his second dream was coming true, though not exactly as he had imagined. Finally, she placed him firmly on a park bench. Sitting there, looking up at the sky, he tried to make sense of everything that was happening. She appeared behind him, handing him a can of juice, her eyes determined. He couldn't help but feel like they looked like a couple, as he sat watching her pull part of her bag aside to drink. She suddenly noticed his bare feet, and without hesitation, she grabbed his leg, asking about it with genuine concern. Realizing the situation, he explained that they were still at school. She quickly apologized, saying that her intention was just to thank him, not to cause trouble. He smiled and reassured her that it was nothing, thanking her for the can of juice. She was a little nervous, confessing that she was very scared today, sharing her insecurity around strangers. He was surprised when she easily crushed the juice can, expressing her frustration. She explained that if she hadn't been so nervous, it wouldn't have happened. He gently asked her if she thought she would feel better once she was settled in school. She nodded, saying that she didn't have any friends yet and had hoped to start the school year without feeling so anxious, understanding the difficulty of not having friends. He offered to help her make friends. She smiled brightly and promised to support him in return. When she asked him what he valued in friends, he thought for a moment and replied that he liked people he could talk to without feeling nervous. The two looked at each other, realizing that they had been able to talk to each other like that. When they heard them, a man nearby approached, laughing and declaring that they were friends already. He just laughed and joked about his past relationships that had led to trouble. A glimmer of hope flashed through him, and then turning to her, he asked if she wanted to be his friend, despite feeling a little strange. She smiled warmly, took his hand, and happily agreed. They both smiled, realizing that they had made a friend on their first day of school. The next day, Kominato felt a little bored in class, until Arai-san cheerfully greeted him with a good morning. He unconsciously stood up and bowed, still maintaining his respectful attitude towards her as the new class president. She smiled and encouraged him to just call her by her first name. However, he still considered her the class president and was truly impressed by how naturally she fulfilled everyone's expectations. He recalled yesterday when the teacher asked for a volunteer to be the class president. The tense atmosphere filled the classroom as no one stood up, and he began to worry that they would be stuck in that awkward silence. Suddenly, Arai-san raised her hand to volunteer with a confident smile. Kominato felt relieved and admired, seeing her as a calm, almost godlike presence. Not only was she beautiful, but she also embodied all the qualities of an ideal leader. He was suddenly pulled out of his thoughts as she bowed to Kamiyama-san, who was hiding under his desk looking embarrassed. Kamiyama awkwardly stood up from his hiding place and pulled at his unbuttoned shirt. Kominato gently advised Arai-san to tone it down. Otherwise, Kamiyama-san might be embarrassed to the point of not being able to bear it. Understanding that, Arai-san smiled warmly, reminding Kamiyama that they had been friends since yesterday. Kominato admired her even more, impressed by her natural ability to connect with people. It took him 2 days to befriend Kamiyama-san, while Arai-san could do it easily. Arai-san excitedly asked if they wanted to join a club at school, although neither Kominato nor Kamiyama had yet decided. He joked that he wanted to join the GHQ, Go Home Quickly Club. However, his mood changed when Arai explained that joining the club was mandatory. Frustrated, he asked her if she has chosen a club yet. Arai thinks for a moment and says that she wants to try something new, since she joined the swimming club in middle school. Arai excitedly suggests that they explore the clubs together. After school, Kominato finds it a bit troublesome and tries to decline. But Arai is persistent, even inviting Kamiyama, who seems a bit hesitant but eventually agrees. They decide to try out the clubs after the school bell rings. When the bell rings, Kominato and Kamiyama let Arai-san decide which club to start with. Arai-san cleverly suggests joining a club that encourages integration. So the three of them decided to try joining the first music club. A club member gave them musical instruments to experiment with, and the club captain gently whispered to the other members that they should accept anyone who could make at least one sound, no matter how small, so as not to run out of members. Arai-san receives a trumpet and plays it beautifully, impressing the teacher, and wondering if this is really her first time playing. He admires her humility as she attributes her success to the instrument, not her own skills. However, frustration flares when Kominato struggles with the instrument, blaming the club members for giving him a broken instrument. A student then approaches Kamiyama-san, instructing her to try playing the drums. Shocked, Kominato watches as she excitedly hits the drum with her head instead of using a stick, causing her to almost sink into the instrument. With a smile, the club leader announces that they will not be joining the club. Arai-san is disappointed but insists that it is the instrument's fault, not Kominato's. Kamiyama excitedly said that it was an instrument for a concert piece and praised Kominato's potential. Encouraged by her encouragement, Arai-san smiled and suggested that they continue to the next club with a new spirit, ready to face new challenges and discoveries as they flipped through the notebook to find the next club. Kominato was initially frustrated with the process, but his mood improved when he saw Arai-san, whose presence made him feel more relaxed. Their next stop was the tea club, where Arai-san expertly prepared a cup of tea. When it was Kamiyama-san's turn, she rushed too much and spilled tea on him, making him wet. Arai-san looked disappointed, thinking that their luck isn't so good, but Arai-san persists and suggests they try the next club. They visit the art club and the choir club, but things don't go well either. Arai-san feels discouraged and almost collapses from stress. Noticing her frustration, Kominato rushes to help her up, telling her that they can keep going and eventually succeed. Determined not to give up, Kominato ties a towel around her head to motivate her and suggests they try the sports club. Arai-san agrees, thinking that Kamiyama's height and strength would be a good advantage. However, when Kamiyama sadly admits that she isn't good at sports, Arai-san encourages her to try, reminding her that she won't know if she doesn't try. Kamiyama hesitates and shares that in middle school, everyone had high expectations of Kamiyama-san because of her height and strength. But her anxiety led to failures, including becoming an invisible member of a club. Tears welling up in her eyes, she confessed that she wanted to participate in high school activities, but was afraid of facing the same fate. She looked down sadly from the railing. Kominato and Arai-san both felt sympathy for her. Kominato thought about how to help her overcome her anxiety, realizing that a small club could help her feel less anxious. Meanwhile, Arai-san noticed Kamiyama looking down and leaned over to see a cheerful girl chatting happily with everyone. Kamiyama confessed his desire to become someone like her. Arai-san admired the girl's uniform and her radiant skin, joking that she must eat well. After thinking for a while, Kominato suddenly had an idea. He excitedly suggested that instead of joining a club, they could create their own club. He enthusiastically explained the idea of creating a space where Kamiyama wouldn't feel anxious. However, his excitement was slightly dampened by the practicalities. At that moment, Arai-san stepped forward, remembered something, and opened a book, showing them that it was possible to form their own club. Excited by the idea, Kominato felt a wave of joy as Arai-san agreed to help them create the club. Arai-san then asked Kominato what he thought about creating a club, joking that it shouldn't be like the GHQ club. The three of them brainstormed ideas for a club that would be fun for everyone without being too tiring after a long discussion. However, they still hadn't decided on a club name. Kamiyama, feeling guilty for slowing down, hesitantly apologizes, sweating profusely from nervousness. Arai reassures her, saying that it's okay since they're already friends. Inspired by Kamiyama's words about friendship and communication, Kominato suddenly becomes enthusiastic and suggests that they create a conversation club. He enthusiastically asks them what they think of the idea. Both girls are surprised by the idea of a conversation club, but Kominato keeps discussing Arai's theory that friendship stems from conversation. He passionately argues that effective communication is the key, emphasizing the need for social interaction. In his mind, he envisions a harmonious school life if the girls improve their communication skills. With the final persuasion, he emphasizes the importance of honing their communication skills. To his surprise, Arai, impressed, approached him and agreed that communication skills were indeed important. She then turns to Kamiyama, asking her opinion on the club idea. Kamiyama nods hopefully, seeing this as an opportunity to improve her skills and be able to talk more freely. Excited, Kominato suggests that they do this, making sure that the club's goal will receive support from everyone. Kamiyama bows gratefully, thanking him for taking care of her troubles, although her face is still hidden behind the paper bag. Kominato wonders if she is smiling underneath it. Then curious, he asks if she can take off the bag when she feels confident enough to talk. But when she nervously clutches the bag and stammers a refusal, he quickly apologizes, worried that he has pushed her too far. They enter the teacher's room, where the teachers find their conversation club idea interesting, but announce that they needed 4 members to officially form the club. This made them nervous. On the way back, Arai asked Kominato if he had any other friends. He thought for a moment and apologized, admitting that so far he had only made friends with Kamiyama. Arai also sighed and explained that her friends had already chosen their clubs. Seeing their worries, Kominato wondered if anyone would actually be interested in joining their club. Kamiyama then reluctantly mentioned that she knew someone who might be interested, making Kominato feel a brief pang of sadness at the thought that she might have a whole group of friends. But Arai immediately cheered up, encouraging Kamiyama to invite the person to join before she joined another club. Without wasting any time, Kamiyama quickly lifted Kominato onto his shoulders and they hurried off to meet this potential friend. When they arrived, she put him down in the hallway and pointed to a girl in a pink cardigan, chatting confidently. Kominato was surprised, wondering if she was friends with such a normal person. However, Arai was happy to recognize the girl. It was the one who had been watching them in the hallway earlier. She complimented Kamiyama on his impressive choice of friends, and eagerly asked if she was really Kamiyama's friend. But Kamiyama, looking annoyed, explained that she had only known the girl for a little while. She thought she would be the perfect choice for their club. When they turned around, they saw the girl chatting animatedly with Achan, who was only half hidden behind the pillar and barely visible. They accidentally overheard her conversations, such as talking about beautiful hair, weight, and he noticed that this girl seemed to have no problem chatting with anyone with a new hope. Arai encourages Kamiyama to invite the girl to join, but she flinches and protests that she can't, looking worried as she speaks. Seeing her discomfort, Arai agrees that adding someone to the group might be a little awkward. Suddenly, as the two girls are chatting, Kominato observes the situation and realizes that the other girl is the only one talking, as he doesn't hear any response from the other girl. But then, the girl suddenly notices him looking and glares at him, mumbling about a strange guy following them. Embarrassed, he starts to introduce himself, but then sees Achan, who actually has wheels instead of legs and a 2D face. Dazed, he screams while Arai stands there, also surprised to realize that Achan is just a cardboard cutout. Regaining his composure, he reminded himself not to get distracted, while Kamiyama found it quite amusing that she was able to hold a conversation with a cardboard model, which showed her social energy. He saw this girl as the perfect candidate for their conversation club. As the girl started to walk away, Kamiyama hurriedly urged him, telling him to invite her. Though nervous, he gathered his courage and ran after her. As he approached the girl, he mentally prepared himself to give up his peaceful life and join the conversation club. He introduced himself and invited her to listen, but when the girl turned around, a sharp light immediately emitted from her eyes, almost hitting him. He stepped back feeling defeated and slightly angry, realizing that he couldn't talk to her. Noticing that Arai was still standing there in shock, he asked Kamiyama to try for him. Despite her nervousness, she bravely approached the girl, sweat starting to bead on her forehead and seeping into the paper bag. She leaned awkwardly, trying to invite the girl to join the chat club. Meanwhile, he watched through his fingers, worried that the girl didn't look like a friendly classmate, but more like a ghost. Fortunately, the girl just frowned, clearly unimpressed by the invitation from a stranger. Kamiyama backed away, clearly disappointed by his failure. He consoled her, admiring her courage and noting that this new girl, despite her intimidating approach, was undaunted. It was clear that she had not joined any clubs, making her an ideal candidate for their club. Finally, when Arai came out of her shock, she suggested that the group try again, this time with full cooperation. Encouraged, they regained their spirits and, with renewed determination, prepared to make a final push to recruit this potentially powerful and somewhat intimidating girl. Arai approached the girl in the most polite and friendly manner, even asking if she could chat with her 2D friend, Achan. The girl turned back and said that Achan wouldn't want to talk. But Arai insisted with a bright smile that she would love to talk and even asked the girl's name. Kamiyama watched intently from the sidelines, watching the interaction as if through a microscope. After realizing that she was being given the silent treatment, Arai glanced at Kamiyama, who cleverly waved a large notebook full of useful tips, signaling her to clarify their eagerness to talk. Recognizing the hint, Arai turned back to the girl, gently reiterating her desire to connect. While Kamiyama and Kominato played cheerleaders in the background, adding strength to her courage. They even showed Arai another page in the notebook, hinting at a decisive blow. Without hesitation, Arai gently took the girl's hand, warmly affirming that they needed her to join their club, once again asking the girl's name. Finally, with her face slightly red and sweat dripping from the tension, the girl quietly introduced herself as Amano Haru and asked if they really needed her. The trio cheered happily and introduced themselves, but when Arai introduced Kominato to the girl, she shot another deadly beam from her eyes, burning the floor as Kominato was about to be hit, wondering why she was attacking him. Before Kominato could even open her mouth, Arai, unfazed, placed her hand on Amano's shoulder, declaring that they were now friends and encouraging her to join their club. Kamiyama was also enthusiastic, adding that she was convinced that it would be fun to have a long conversation with everyone. Although Amano-san appreciated their enthusiasm, she still held on to her 2D image and gently refused, explaining that she could not join a club with boys. When Amano-san refused, both girls turned to look at Kominato, making him feel even more self-conscious. Noticing his sad expression, Kamiyama bravely asked her why she could not join a club with boys. Amano frowned, pondering as if unsure, then finally replied with a serious expression that she couldn't, because the boy would start talking to her. Kominato, confused by this reason, inadvertently asks if gender is really that important, and immediately receives a blinding death glare from her, which he hastily avoids. Feeling nervous at her uncontrollable laser gaze, he is at a loss for what to do next. Amano hides her eyes as Kominato, panicking, vows to stay away from talking to her again. To ease the tension, Arai steps in, complimenting her cute and shy personality, adding that it must be tiring to avoid constant attention. Amano, still embarrassed by the compliment, glances at her 2D friend, Achan, and gives in, saying that while she is touched, she still cannot join the boys' club. Seeing Amano's hesitation because of Kominato, Arai happily offers a deal. She can join if there is a rule that Kominato cannot talk to her during club activities. Shocked, Kominato immediately protests, saying that this violates his basic right to speak in the club. However, Arai calmly explains that conversation does not always have to be verbal. At that moment, Kominato unconsciously raises his foot, as a deadly light flashes under it. He has to shout in frustration, accusing her of trying to attack him when he hasn't said anything to her, but Arai rushes to do everything. However, seeing Amano's face collapse, looking very sad, Kominato feels taken aback. The other girls quickly signal him to be quiet, worried that she might be about to cry. Kamiyama suggests cheering her up, and Kominato finds it ironic that everyone is trying to make her laugh, even though she just tried to attack him for talking. Arai gently took Amano's hand, smiled, and apologized, explaining that the flashes only appeared when she was startled. She sympathetically suggested that the feeling of being cut off mid-sentence might have caused the flashes. Amano was so moved that she almost cried, but Arai comforted her, saying that even her flashes would be welcome in the club. With a mischievous smile, Arai suggested that she could wear the electromagnetic armor, joking that she would try making one. Kamiyama then cheerfully walked in, suggesting that they eat crepes after the club, but as soon as she let go of Amano's hand, Amano grimaced because Kamiyama had held her hand a little too tightly. Things got awkward, and no one knew what to do next. Kominato showed up in a black suit, joking that he was a seaweed warrior, and asking if eating it would improve his algebra scores. Both girls widened their eyes in surprise when he suddenly blurted out an unrelated joke. Relieved that Amano didn't shoot a beam this time. He carefully removed his mask, but she immediately rushed forward, grabbing him by the collar with a stern look. Amano glared at him and warned him not to utter such nonsense again, revealing with a frown that she hated jokes. Determined to give it one last try, Kominato forced a smile and, in a bit of desperation, made up a story about seaweed lovers being ridiculed, but a corrupt monk buying seaweed from a pot-bellied man. As he told it, he felt ashamed of himself for mentioning seaweed so many times, but he still glanced to see Amano's reaction. She immediately yelled at him to stop, declaring that she really didn't like such things. Embarrassed, Kominato covered his face, realizing that he might have gone too far in trying to make her laugh. However, Arai nudged him, pointing out that Amano seemed to be on the verge of laughing. This gave him more motivation. Encouraged, Kominato began humming a silly tune about a perverted seaweed-loving monk. To his surprise, Amano bowed slightly, looking grateful, despite her earlier calling him a degenerate monk. This confused him as he realized that she seemed to be enjoying it, despite having just declared that she hated jokes. While he was wondering if it was really that hard to make her laugh, Amano suddenly asked out of curiosity if the monk had been able to buy seaweed. Staying true to his role, he answered, no, and she suddenly burst into tears. Trying to reassure her, he insisted that it was a meaningful and good story. They continued to chat until Arai, who had been watching, interjected. She remarked with satisfaction that Amano had not fired any deadly beams, hinting that her smile, empathy, and a sense of humor made her comfortable around Kominato. Arai suggests that they might have become friends. Kominato bows, silently expressing that he is willing to accept her raise if it means they can be friends. Touched by his willingness, Amano decides to accept Kominato as a friend, hugging her 2D friend, Achan. She declares that she will join the club, as she has been looking for a place where Achan can also go. Overjoyed, Arai nearly hugs Amano and happily suggests that she put her name on the class roster. Seeing the two girls filled with happiness, Kominato and Kamiyama also cheer, celebrating the official start of the Conversation Club. With deep emotion, Kamiyama expresses that club activities were once a distant dream, and she is happy that this dream has become a reality. Overjoyed, Kominato, with a hint of curiosity, asked about her other dreams. Kamiyama sighed and confessed that if she ever took off the paper bag on her head, her remaining dreams would be very small and easy to fulfill. Then, with a hint of sadness, she revealed that many people had advised her to remove the paper bag if she really wanted to achieve her dream. She had considered it, but never had the courage to do so. With sincere appreciation, she reached out, thanking him for helping her realize a wish without asking her to take off the paper bag. In joy, she called him her hero. Initially a little flustered, Kominato blushed at her words and humbly explained that he was not really a hero, because heroes usually save people in real danger. However, he happily declared himself her friend, promising to support her at any time. Although he couldn't see her expression under the paper bag, he could feel that his words had made her truly happy. After overcoming a series of challenges and near-death experiences, they finally felt complete joy. Their communication club was officially established. Excitedly starting their first activity, Kominato was met with silence. Amano was giggling and chatting with Achan about shopping and fashion, while Arai cheerfully encouraged him to do his best. Despite his fatigue, he still felt a little relieved from her support. However, anxiety began to creep in when he realized that Kamiyama had disappeared, even though she had been sitting nearby just a few minutes ago. He went to look for Kamiyama and found her trying to hide. When he asked what was wrong, she stammered that this was the first club activity and she felt nervous. Encouraging her to join, Kominato then approached Amano, suggesting that they start the first meeting. In response, Amano hugged Achan tightly, angrily calling him useless for trying to communicate with her. Kominato was disappointed, feeling the pressure of not being able to start the club without her participation. However, seeing his dejected expression, Amano reluctantly agreed to go along with his suggestion, if only for a short while. Although he found it difficult to grasp the atmosphere, Kominato focused on getting everyone's attention and suggested a simple topic for discussion. He invited the members to raise their hands if they had any ideas. But immediately Amano shouted, questioning whether he was thinking of something inappropriate. To ease the tension, he quickly took out a suggestion box, inviting everyone to write down their ideas on small pieces of paper. The members all followed suit. Kominato opened the box and pulled out the first piece of paper. His eyes widened as he read the contents. Discuss the bad things about Kominato-kun. He glanced at Amano, knowing for sure that she was the one behind this proposal. Although she strongly denied it, she couldn't help but smile, even adding that it was a great topic to discuss. Frustrated, he tore the paper to shreds and rejected the idea, causing Amano to shout that she had poured her heart and soul into it, clearly confirming that she was the author of the proposal. He continued to pull out the second piece of paper, this time with the proposal, discuss the JIS standards for uniforms. Arai immediately raised his hand, claiming to be the writer, which Kominato had expected. When Amano wondered what the JIS standards were, Arai passionately explained that JIS stood for Japanese Industrial Standards, set by the cabinet minister in charge, and it is a national standard in Japan. Although Arai was enthusiastic, Kominato interrupted her in frustration, saying that this was not an appropriate topic for the club. Arai's face fell as she apologized, realizing that the box was empty and that there were no really viable ideas for the first club meeting. Kominato decided to review all the suggestions at once. At that moment, Kominato announced that if they didn't decide on a topic soon, he would have to go home. When Amano picked up the box, she found that it was unexpectedly heavier than usual. As she tilted the box, a piece of paper soaked in water flowed out, disintegrating into pulp. Kamiyama-san stared at the scene, tears welling up in her eyes as she apologized, explaining that she was too nervous for this to happen. Thinking about the situation, Kominato realized that keeping the ideas anonymous was really unnecessary. Amano-san immediately yelled at him, mocking him for not contributing anything and calling him useless. Without delay, he quickly responded sarcastically, suggesting that she label him idiot if she wanted to. Surprisingly, she agreed with him without hesitation, which made him laugh uncontrollably. Kominato carefully observes Amano-san and realizes that, although she seems shy at first, she actually possesses a hidden talent for communication that she is deliberately hiding. This makes her an interesting mystery to solve. Kominato suggests that the group focus on basic conversation topics, such as favorite food or movies, thinking that they would be more approachable. The group's surprise at this suggestion leaves him feeling a little disappointed, realizing that they had never even thought of such everyday topics. Both nervous and excited, he begins to share his favorite foods and topics, revealing that he likes math and loves curry and hamburger steak. Arai is surprised and shocked to learn that he likes math, since she has difficulty with it. He explains that math doesn't require too much memorization, which makes him feel more interested. As usual, Amano-san teased him about his food preferences, saying that even an elementary school student wouldn't choose such things. He replied that they were just basic, normal dishes. However, she became flustered and a little panicked when he asked about her favorite food. After a moment of hesitation, she admitted that she liked pasta and parfaits because girls are like that. He immediately started teasing her, saying that she must like all foods that started with the letter P, like panties. She nodded in agreement, saying that she ate those foods like a girl, but soon realized the true meaning of his words. Her face turned red as Kominato burst out laughing, leaving her screaming in anger that he had tricked her into saying that. While they were having a playful exchange, Arai accidentally asked her innocently whether she preferred cotton or nylon underwear, making Amano angrily shout that she didn't eat them. Turns back to Kominato, she tries to explain her other food preferences. But at that moment, Kamiyama interrupts, asking her what she really wants to eat right now. Her expression changes, turning to confusion and surprise, as if the world around her disappeared, leaving her alone. Observing her uncertainty, Kominato reassures her that it's okay if she doesn't want to answer. Muttering up her courage, she reveals in a choked voice that she had a hard time making friends in elementary and middle school, and that she was determined to change that when she got to high school. She went to the library to look for books, but found that her classmates had formed close friendship groups. Overcome with emotion, she cries, lamenting that she can't approach anyone. But in her loneliness, she finds a paper cutout of A-chan to talk to, which brings her joy and helps ease her anxiety. She shares that A-chan has become her friend, but despite that, she realizes that no one else is interested in being her friend. Seeing her sad face, Kominato feels a pang of sadness and tries to comfort her, understanding her hardship but not being able to completely feel sorry for her. She quickly reassures everyone that A-chan is now her best friend and that they don't need to worry about her. At that moment, Kamiyama steps up, sharing that although she isn't good at communicating with people, she can understand them. With renewed encouragement, Kamiyama raises her hand and gives her a thumbs up, which makes her feel encouraged and respond, tears of joy falling. She calls Kamiyama her second friend after A-chan and expresses her gratitude. This makes Arai and Kominato feel confused and a little uncomfortable since they thought they were already her friends. Wiping away her tears, she innocently explains that they became friends because they wanted her to join their group. Realizing her sincerity, both Arai and Kominato reach out to her, eager to solidify their friendship. With flushed faces and overflowing emotions, she finally takes their hands, marking an unforgettable day filled with friendship. When the school bell rings, signaling the end of the fourth lesson and the start of lunch, Kominato eagerly grabs his lunchbox, planning to eat quickly and take a nap. But as soon as he looks down, a strange noise catches his attention. Turning around, he was stunned to see Kamiyama approaching, holding the entire desk like a lantern, on which was her lunchbox. Tears rolled down and something red seemed to be on her bag. She asked if they could have lunch together. He was a little surprised to see this but quickly agreed, asking her to stop scaring him. A moment later, Arai happily joined in, carrying her own lunchbox, eager to share the meal with everyone. Arai recognized Kamiyama's lunchbox with a bear motif and immediately complimented it, saying that she loved anything with a bear motif. Kamiyama was pleased with the compliment, explaining that although bears are indeed strong and scary, when they are turned into characters, they become cute. She added that it was wonderful to be able to love animals in that way. Arai joined in the conversation, mentioning that teddy bears had started the trend of making everything cute. While holding her chopsticks, Kominato casually shares her opinion that anything soft, not just bears, can be cute. Kamiyama then asked with genuine curiosity if she would be cute if she were soft, imagining her as a strong bear hiding behind a paper bag. Kominato panics a bit, advising her to give up on the idea of wanting to be cute and instead embrace her own strengths. Arai also smiles and reassures Kamiyama that she is already cute in her own way. Just then, Amano enters the classroom with A-chan in her arms, laughing and sharing her hatred for pineapple and sweet and sour pork, saying that they are horrible. Pork and pineapple are even worse. The class is still engrossed in their conversations, not paying attention to Amano and Oi-chan. Kominato realizes that they are used to Amano's jokes and even makes space for A-chan, as if she were a real student. He is impressed by her confidence as she enters the classroom, as if it is her first time entering the classroom, despite having to pass through other classes to get here. Finally, Amano put A-chan down in front of their table, and without looking at the three, asked if A-chan had done her homework. Amano decided that A-chan had done it, and immediately asked if she could copy A-chan's work. The three of them sat down to eat and watched, realizing that she was putting on an act, pretending that she really didn't like doing her homework. However, her emotions quickly change, starting to tear up and confessing heartbreakingly to Achan that she is a member of the conversation club, but feels sad that she is the only one who has never been invited to the conversation, all without anyone looking in their direction. Amano begins to cry harder, turning to Kominato and accusing him of not inviting her, then dramatically warning him that she might kill him someday. Realizing that she is serious, Kominato immediately covers her face, half expecting Amano to shoot a beam of light at him. But instead she sighs and sadly admits that she has turned down other invitations before. Noticing this, Amano immediately states that the more the merrier, and she agrees to join them. Kominato is happy to see her back in a cheerful mood, opening her lunchbox. Amano enthusiastically compliments Kominato's sandwiches and asks about the ingredients. Amano happily pointed to one sandwich and saw that it had radish and melon inside, and another had fried potato meat inside. Noticing Kominato's hesitant expression, she handed him another sandwich, proudly saying that it had butter and was especially delicious. Kominato tried a bite and was pleasantly surprised that it was delicious. The whole club sat together, Amano suggesting to discuss activities for the May holidays. However, Kominato felt a little discouraged about having to participate in club activities during his free time. Arai enthusiastically agreed with Amano, and even Kamiyama, who had no other plans, joined in when they mentioned following the majority rule. Kominato was surprised, realizing that they had decided, without him participating, he half-heartedly suggested that they should focus on the club's weaknesses, as other clubs do when they have a long break. Arai caught on to him and pointed out that the club lacked a clubroom and would probably have to do outdoor activities. The girls quickly agreed to the idea of going shopping. This left Kominato confused, not understanding how this would solve any of the club's weaknesses. Seeing his puzzled expression, Amano told a story. She explained that shopping was a real challenge for her. She recalled that every time she asked Achan for shopping advice, the store clerk seemed to disappear. She remembered one time when she asked Achan in front of a store, the clerk quickly disappeared, leaving her to go home empty-handed. Realizing that Achan can scare the staff, Kominato can only silently look at her in surprise and a little sympathy. Kamiyama also shares her difficulty with shopping, explaining that her anxiety attacks often cause her to buy everything in a panic. Kamiyama has even been refused entry to stores for covering her face too much. When Kominato asks if their vacation will be entirely focused on shopping, Kamiyama enthusiastically mentions an outfit she was determined to buy if they all went. The other girls become emotional, leaving Kominato feeling confused until Amano suddenly speaks up, accusing him of underestimating the difficulty of shopping for clothes. Kominato suggests that it would be easier if the store staff took the initiative to approach them, but she immediately refutes, explaining that overly aggressive sales tactics only make her buy things she doesn't want or need. Kamiyama then admitted that she avoided trying on clothes in stores for fear of them getting damp. Instead, she often shopped online, which sometimes resulted in clothes that didn't fit properly. Arai, looking a little unnerved, admitted that she had trouble even talking to store employees. Hearing their concerns, Kominato reluctantly agreed that shopping did indeed seem scary. Noticing his doubts, Amano became a little angry, quickly makes it clear that she isn't afraid of dressing rooms, when he teases her by mentioning rumors of people disappearing in dressing rooms. Her terrified expression makes him admit that while ghosts may be scary, it's the people who are truly terrifying. He then recounts his own horror story. Customers trying on countless outfits, taking selfies, and then leaving without buying anything. The feeling disgusts him. The girls, understanding his pain, sigh, agreeing that perhaps shopping isn't as fun as they thought it would be. To lighten the mood, Kominato encourages them to pursue Kamiyama's goal, but she humbly declines, not wanting to be a burden. With a hopeful smile, Amano suggests another type of activity she's always wanted to try. The crepe stand at the train station after school. Arai's eyes lit up immediately, enthusiastically agreeing with the idea and mentioning the food cart near the station, where they could avoid the hassle of dealing with too many employees. Amano smiled brightly, eagerly asking Kamiyama if she liked crepes, and Kamiyama nodded enthusiastically. Although Kominato wasn't a fan of sweets, he couldn't help but feel happy seeing the girls' excitement. In the end, the group agreed to go to the crepe stand after school. When the bell rang, Kominato couldn't help but be surprised to see the girls preparing as if they were preparing for a battle, not just a simple outing. Kamiyama, for example, carried a paper bag that she had specially prepared for the occasion, receiving compliments from the other students on its cuteness and style. Kominato was still in doubt, watching the girls carrying their huge shoulder bags, their faces full of concentration, clearly preparing for something more than a trip to the crepe stand. When the group finally arrived at the crowded crepe shop, which was the club's first field trip, Kominato felt a thought flash through his mind. Were they simply going to eat crepes, or was there something else lurking behind it? Kominato breathed a sigh of relief, surrounded by a sea of people, not a single empty seat in sight. He could only be thankful that nothing strange had happened yet. Meanwhile, he enjoyed watching the girls passionately debate their choice of toppings: strawberries, cream, bananas, or other delicacies. As they chatted animatedly, he couldn't help but laugh at their enthusiasm. Although it was a bit odd, he reminded himself that they were just normal schoolgirls. Suddenly, Arai turned to him, flashing a bright smile and asking what he would order. He hesitated, joking that he would choose the same thing as her, not understanding all the options. However, Amano misunderstood, thinking that he wanted to choose the same thing as her, and blushed. Panicked, she started to babble about how ordering the same thing would make them look like a couple. While Kominato hurriedly explained everything, Amano's expression showed that she was ready to shoot him a deadly glare. Suddenly, he was distracted by a splash of water. It was Kamiyama. Her bag was wet and she was struggling to order, but was speechless when she saw her in trouble. Amano and Arai quickly ran over to comfort Kamiyama, helping her dry off and gently encouraging her. Kominato stood watching, feeling both amused and impressed by the girl's friendship. Amano, with a determined look on her face, offered a unique trick to help Kamiyama ease her anxiety. Imagine everyone around her as Achan. To Kominato's surprise, Kamiyama's anxiety seemed to melt away, and she regained her composure. In high spirits, Arai decided to take the lead, marveling at the delicious crepes and urging everyone to order before the place got too crowded. Emboldened by her small victory, Amano excitedly announced that she would be ordering her own special custard ice cream. However, before she could rush off alone, Kominato shouted a warning, reminding her that she could be in danger if she were to rush into the crowd without Achan by her side. Amano turned back, with a determined look in her eyes, insisting that they must trust her serious expression, that she was ready to face this challenge alone. Gathering her strength, Amano headed towards the cart, but as soon as she saw the cheerful owner standing there, she faltered. She tried to order, but the owner interrupted, smiling and telling her she was cute and offering her a special discount. Before Amano could explain her choice, the owner insisted that tropical fruits were perfect for her skin and hands, and handed her a giant crepe, specifically the Heaven Pegasus, accompanied by the words Guten Tag. Amano is so flustered that she ends up buying the giant dessert, and when she returns to the group with teary eyes, she tells Kamiyama it's her turn. Kamiyama is clearly nervous too, but Amano begs her to avenge her. With renewed determination, Kamiyama vows to conquer the crepe, declaring that she has an infallible plan. She puts a small black sticker on her shirt to enhance her cuteness, hoping that it will give her the upper hand. Kominato tries to intervene, but Amano quickly puts a hand on his shoulder, warning him not to doubt the strategy she has carefully prepared. Miraculously, they watch as Kamiyama steps forward and, to everyone's surprise, succeeds in ordering the crepe she really wants. Kominato's turn came, and he nervously approached the cart, trying to appear calm as he began to tell the boss about his choice. However, his hands shook and he accidentally dropped the coin. Watching it roll far away from the cart, he felt panicked. Frustrated, he bent down to pick it up, but realized the coin was out of reach. Suddenly, Kamiyama appeared, gently lifting the entire cart to retrieve the coin for him. Kominato was surprised and thanked her as she handed him the coin. When Kominato stood up to place his order, he noticed the boss slumped over in the cart, clearly shocked by Kamiyama's strength. The boss regains his balance and asks Kominato what he wants, but Kominato falters, nervously noticing that the boss is holding his hand with a tearful smile. The boss declares that his hand can only make the special super extra large with tropical fruits, automatically deciding on Kominato's order. Although Kominato already has another dessert in mind, he finds himself holding a giant crepe filled with fruit. The portion is so large that Kominato can't even carry it. As each of the group returns with their giant crepe, Arai smiles with excitement, while Amano, still in tears, vows to win next time. In the end, everyone is very happy with the trip, having learned a lot and enjoyed a special adventure together. They end the day with Arai still blaming Kominato for copying her dish, while Kominato awkwardly apologizes, creating a lighthearted ending to the club's first extracurricular activity. The next day, Kominato enters the crowded market to participate in the Conversation Club's activity, feeling overwhelmed by the crowds during the holiday season. Unexpectedly, the crowd suddenly parted, making way for him. Relieved, he saw Amano chatting with Achan about their favorite action movies and battles, while Kamiyama, dressed casually but still wearing his familiar paper bag, walked beside her. Realizing that the crowd was avoiding them because of the two girls' unique presence, Kominato felt more at ease. As he approached and apologized for being late, the girls reassured him that they had just arrived. However, Kamiyama's mysterious water had evaporated at some point, implying that they had actually been waiting for him for about 30 minutes. Amano, with an overly worried expression, joked that she had thought he had been kidnapped by a serial killer and had probably had his face peeled off. Kominato laughs, asking if she's living in the same Japan as her. Amano immediately responds, loudly asserting that it's impossible to know for sure, then adding that it's not impossible. When Kominato thanks Amano for her concern, she becomes flustered, suddenly summoning a beam of light that knocks him to the ground, joking that she's bleeding. Amano quickly explains that she's only worried because they're club members. Changing the subject, Kominato asks about Arai, and just as Kamiyama is about to answer, Arai appears, apologizing for being late because she took so long to decide what to wear. Kominato, bewildered, remarks that Arai is still wearing her school uniform. With an innocent look, Arai grabs her shirt and asserts that this is her usual outfit. Cheerfully added that it was also her holiday uniform. Her enthusiasm left everyone confused. Still puzzled by Arai's insistence on wearing her uniform in all circumstances, Kominato suggested that she try wearing something other than her school uniform. Arai gasped in surprise, confessing that the thought had never occurred to her. In high spirits, they officially begin their club activities. Grabbing their magnifying glasses and scouring a clothing store, Amano has her eye on an item to buy, but they all remind themselves that their mission is to shop within their budget. The Conservation Club has a clear mission, and the group is determined to stick to their goal, even if the sales clerk suggests otherwise. When Kominato asks Kamiyama if she needs to take off the paper bag on her head to check her measurements in the store, she looks excited as if she has just come up with a great idea. Amano, brimming with confidence, also shares her plan to enter the store with Kamiyama without Achan. Kominato and Arai enter first, greeted by the sales clerk. However, Kominato can't help but worry about the other two. The sales clerk, noticing their unique attire, politely asked about their clothing preferences and joked whether they had come straight from club activities. Unable to hold back, the group burst into laughter, feeling that this little adventure had gotten off to an interesting start. Arai quickly explained to the staff that they were actually still in club mode. Mustering up some courage, Kominato added that the club's work wasn't done until everyone was home safely. Realizing that their usual sales tactics weren't working, the staff began to adjust their approach. The saleswoman smiled, said she'd be around, and reminded them not to be afraid to grab something to eat and walk away. Kominato was truly impressed by her communication skills, always having the perfect answer to every question. But then, he was surprised to see Kamiyama enter the shop, wearing a cute hat that subtly obscured his face after the incident at the crepe shop. The relief quickly turned to worry when he realized that Amano had completely disappeared. Just a moment later, Kominato saw Kamiyama holding a cute outfit, asking someone for advice. When he leaned closer, he realized that Amano was hiding right behind Kamiyama, the two of them performing an elaborate couple jacket tactic. When the sales assistant suggested a light-colored shirt that would flatter Kamiyama's complexion, Amano, still in hiding, politely declined. Kominato stealthily approached Amano, whispering her agreement with the assistant's comments about the color that would suit her skin tone, but also encouraging her to choose the color she liked best. Seeing their determination, the sales assistant smiled slightly and let them choose their own clothes. Amano, still a little embarrassed, finally decided on a pink shirt with a prominent tiger print. When they reached the checkout counter, the two girls skillfully performed their disguises. Kamiyama wore a hat that covered her face, while Amano paid with one hand and secretly held the new shirt with the other. Kominato couldn't help but smile when she saw Amano happily choosing the item she liked. Rai winked wittily, cheering for Amano's victory, but Amano emotionally admitted that she couldn't have done it without Achan by her side. Kaminato comforted and encouraged Amano that she should be proud of herself for daring to choose the item she truly loved. Amano smiled gratefully, her eyes sparkling with emotion. Kamiyama interjected, praising Amano for successfully completing the shopping mission. Blushing, Amano gently nudged Kamiyama, reminding her that it was her turn to try. She promised Kamiyama that, if needed, Kominato would always be there to support her. Kamiyama took a breath, preparing to embark on his shopping challenge. The others watched intently, filled with hope and ready to cheer.